everyone. My name is Michelle Solari, and I am with Alliance San Diego, and we are about to get started with our presentation. I will let Jocelyn and Andrea take it from here.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrea Tecpuyotl-Tepale. I'm a student coordinator for Torero's Dream.
Hi everyone, my name is Jocelyn Holguin and I work at the Moving Center at the University of San Diego, and I am co-lead with Torero's Dream.
All right. Would you like to share a little bit about your program?
Yes, totally. So Torero's Dream is our confidential student group that provides support for Daca and undocumented students here at the University of San Diego. We meet once a month to talk about anything regarding school to life. It's a very close-knit community. We support each other throughout the times that students are students here at USD. And the idea is to provide a safe space where students can be themselves and bring questions and also support each other in their journey of higher education. Andrea, yeah, is there anything else that you want to share?
No, but that I think like these, providing like spaces like this is also really important for our students, especially when it comes to our group is, being able to make sure that they have the resources and opportunities available to them, both at the university, but also outside of the university, and make sure we are like providing that context and contacts for when, they leave the university as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. My name is Michelle Solari. I'm with Alliance San Diego, and we are a community-based organization that builds coalitions to promote justice and social change. And we know that when we work together, we can build a collective and inclusive democracy, which includes everybody, and it allows everyone to reach their full potential in an environment of harmony, safety, equality, and justice. We are a large organization that has a bunch of different departments, including civic engagement. But today, and our policy team, and today you're meeting with me from our human rights team, and I'll go into a little bit more about that, but we really believe in inclusion, compassion, justice, collaboration, and integrity. So the human rights team consists of myself, Hector, who is our fully accredited representative, Asma, who is about to be an accredited representative. And essentially what that means is they can help individuals before United States Immigration or Citizenship and Immigration Service with their applications, even though they're not attorneys, because they've gone through a full process to get accredited and they're affiliated with a recognized organization, and it's all under my direction as an immigration attorney. And we do all sorts of legal services from consultations, naturalization, DACA, green card renewals, and we look at different avenues that might be available to individuals, but we also do education outreach like the one today. And so if you ever want us to talk about anything else, you can always feel free to invite us back, and we're happy to do that. So today we're going to talk about financial aid for undocumented students, work options after you graduate, and the current status of DACA, and some immigration relief that might be available to you. So let's start about the financial aid. And if you're here, you probably already know about this, but just in case, I want to make sure. So FAFSA is the federal student aid, and that's on a national level, but it only provides assistance for those who have lawful permanent residency status or are U.S. citizens, and they fall within a certain income range. But they don't really look at those who are undocumented or dreamers. They're not considered for financial aid. And so California, being the great state it is, passed a couple different laws to help students. So it started off in 2001 that said, okay, if you live in the state of California, you no longer have to pay out-of-state tuition. You can now pay in-state tuition. and then it continued expanding and said, okay, you can not only pay out of state, but you can pay in state, but you can also get grants and scholarships. And so it kept expanding to make it more inclusive of everybody, regardless of the documentary status, because California recognizes the contributions of people from all backgrounds. And so regardless of what happens to DACA or legislation, California is here to help those who are undocumented in our community qualify for financial aid. But the state of California is like, that's not that. It shouldn't stop there. We need to also help these students when they graduate be able to pursue a career, get licensed, and work. And so they passed this law in 2014 that says that anybody that finishes all the necessary requirements for state licensing, regardless of their immigration status, they can apply for a professional license. So you can be an attorney and have a bar license to practice law, and you can be undocumented at the same time. And the only caveat is you have to apply for an individualized tax identification number, but that's something that anybody can do. It's free. You just have to do it when you file your taxes. And so that's definitely an avenue that's available to individuals to do. So there's the bar license, you can be an esthetician, you can, there's all sorts of different licenses that you can get to pursue your career. And so as always, like I always talk about the DREAM Act and all the different types of financial aid and stuff, but even though there's no social security number required and everybody qualifies if they have certain residency requirements or time in the United States in the state of California, it doesn't provide a pathway to citizenship. It's not an immigration status, and it's super confusing because this is the California DREAM Act, but on the federal level, we talk about the DREAM Act, which is a pathway to citizenship. So I just always want to make sure that it's super clear that it's different programs, and this is a state program versus a pathway to citizenship. So I know that I'm seeing some questions coming up in the chat, and I definitely want to answer questions, but if it's a particular question that's very specific, I may not be able to answer it on the chat, but maybe we can shoot an email afterwards, just because I want to make sure that I give advice that is applicable to everybody here. So I want to talk about what can you do when you graduate, right? So in the state of California, there is no laws that prevent an individual who is undocumented from opening up their own business. And in fact, there's laws that help undocumented people open up their own businesses. So as I mentioned before, with the professional license, you can qualify for a professional license with a social security number or without a social security number. But this AB 2148 also allows you to apply for a business license without a social security number. They're called something different in every state or in every area of the state. And so in California, it's called the business tax certificate, but it's something that you can apply for without a social security number. You have to have some sort of identification and an address, and you can apply that way. And just so you know, your address is protected. So when you apply for it, you can have a business address that is completely separate from this application process. So there are a couple of things to consider before you open up your own business. One is, do you want to be an independent contractor or do you want to be a business owner? How are you going to pay your taxes? Everybody has to pay taxes. So you can pay it either with a social security number, an employment identification number, or an individualized tax identification number. And I'm going to go over all these things in more depth in a little bit. And then also you need to think about your business structure. And I want to share these two really great resources for you. This Immigrants Rising is a state-run organization, and they provide tons of resources for students and new entrepreneurs, and even those that have been in business for a little bit, about how to get started. What should you be looking at? Where are things that what types of things should you study? What types of businesses are more accessible for the immigrant community as an independent contractor? Not just the immigrant community, as an independent contractor generally. And then Access to Jobs is another great organization, and they're here local in San Diego, and they provide training and help you with all the different steps of the process. So you can have an organization here that can help you directly, whereas Immigrants Rising is more of an online resource for you to look at and consider some of the different options available. So I want to start here with what is an employee versus an independent contractor? And this is a very, very important distinction. So if you're an employee, you need to have work authorization. But if you're an independent contractor, you do not need to have work authorization. And so when you apply for a job, generally you would fill out a W-9 form where they check to see your immigration status when you fill it out. As an independent contractor, nobody's asking you for that kind of documentation. They're asking you for a service, they're asking you to complete a task, but you don't work for that company. They are more of a client of yours, or you're providing a product or a service to them. So for example, if I wanted to market my business, I do marketing and I'm going to go market Jocelyn's business. So Jocelyn is, I don't know, she has her own hair salon, for example, and she hires me to do marketing for that hair salon. I'm not an employee of Jocelyn's. She just asked me to do a job for her or complete a task to get the word out about her business. And so she will ask me to fill out a 1099 as an independent contractor, but she's not going to ask me to fill out a W-9 as an employee. And the 1099 is something so that she can write it off on her taxes and I can claim it on my taxes. So there's protections that are available to employees and that aren't available to independent contractors. So it's really important that you look at other ways to insure yourself or other ways to protect yourself in case something happens. And then as far as taxes, as an employee, taxes are automatically taken out of your paycheck. So you don't have to really worry about if you're paying your taxes, they're automatically taken out. But as an independent contractor, you have to set aside money to pay your taxes on a quarterly basis. And so it's really important that you know that before you open up your business. Otherwise, you're going to get hit with a big tax bill or tax liability that you didn't know about. And so it's important that you know about it at the outset so you can prepare for it. So these are some things that I kind of put together, and obviously there's way more options outside of this list of options, but these are types of businesses that are really good for independent contractors. So I gave the example of advertising or marketing before, but accounting, anytime a business wants, all their taxes done, they will hire an accountant to do it. But it's not just taxes, it's payroll, it's their balance sheets, it's the month-to-month operations, and depending on how big the company is, it could be a daily operation, or they report it out weekly to an accountant, but they don't have enough to do it in-house, and so they outsource that type of service. So when you're thinking about what you're going to major in, accounting is a wonderful way to do it. Advertising is something that you can do. Business consulting. One thing that I didn't think about before, but you can be a notary. And so if you hook up with, a real estate agent and you're signing off deals, and you're doing all the notary work for that, you can make a good amount of money as a notary for those types of services. And the license is relatively inexpensive. And then outside of professional services, there's also the gig economy. Obviously, the driver for Uber or Lyft, you can sell products on Etsy or eBay, or I know that there's a million more out there, but you get the idea. Or you can also think about one-time jobs through websites like TaskRabbit or Fiverr, and you can display kind of what your services are and people can contract you out there. But if you go to Immigrants Rising, they have a list of tons of different websites that you can be on and different ways to look at that up as well. So every business owner, individual, they have to pay taxes. Everybody pays taxes. And so there are 3 different tax identification numbers. The one is a social security number that people are more familiar with. And if you have a social security number, it is your social security number for life. So say you have Daca and you no longer have Daca for whatever reason. That social security card you were given is still your social security number, and you can still continue to use that number. But there's also an employee identification number, and I like to look at it as almost like a social security number for a business. And so if you have a corporation or an LLC, or you want to hire employees, you need to have an employer identification number. And so but you need to have an ITIN number, an individualized tax identification number, or a social security number to apply for an EIN. The good news is the employer identification number, it takes about 15 minutes from going to the website, filling out their form, to them auto-generating your employer identification number. So it's something that can be done relatively quickly. Versus the individualized tax identification number, it does take a little bit of time to process it. And I want to explain a little bit about what it is, because it's not just for people who are undocumented. There's a lot of people that have ITIN numbers. There are foreign investors that have ITIN numbers. There are people that need to pay taxes for whatever reason, but they are not. They don't have work authorization, right? So those could be somebody that own a property here in the United States. They could be somebody that's opening up a business. So there's all sorts of different people that could have an ITIN number. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're undocumented in the United States. It's merely a way to pay your taxes. So another thing you want to think about is what kind of business are you going to be? If you're a sole proprietor means that you own your own business and you are running your business, doing whatever it is that you do, right? And you don't have a corporation, you don't have an LLC. It's just you running your business. And if you don't do anything, if you don't if you start your business and you don't form anything, you're automatically a sole proprietor. So you don't have to do anything. It automatically happens. But if you run your business as a sole proprietor, as an LLC, as a corporation, you need to run your business under your name. So I would have to say Michelle Solari Consulting, or if I want to have a more creative name than just my name, I have to file for something called a fictitious name. And it's pretty inexpensive. It's about $40, and you write that you're the owner of the business, and this is what you're going to be, your business is going to be known as. So maybe my business is Amazing Consultant, and and that's how the world knows me, is Amazing Consultants. And but the reason why this is so important is that even though the world knows me as Amazing Consultants, it's still important that they know who they're doing business with. So they can go to the county and they can say who owns Amazing Consultants, and they can find out who the owner is of that company. And it's for the protection of everybody. And so, and that's regardless if you're a sole proprietor, a limited liability company, or a corporation. However, if you are a limited liability company or a corporation, you must have an employer identification number. This number allows you to have employees. If you cannot have an employee with an ITIN or a social security number, because your social security number doesn't allow you to withhold taxes for a third party, if that makes sense. It's the EIN it's the business's social security number. So this person isn't attached to you as a person, they're attached to the company. And so that's a really important thing. And so it's really important to know that if you have employees, you're not only using your EIN, but if they're an employee, they have to have authorization to work in the United States. And so if you're if you're hiring somebody, you can't hire somebody if you know that they aren't authorized to work here. That's an employee and that's an independent contractor. And so it's you want to share your ITIN number when you fill out your 1099 form, but not share your documentary status, because that could interfere with them actually hiring you on as an independent contractor. And you definitely don't want to mismark anything saying that you are a US citizen in any way, because you don't want to have any sort of misrepresentations anywhere. But you know, the company gets in trouble for hiring somebody that they know did not have documentary status, but they don't get in trouble for having an independent contractor who's undocumented that they were unaware of. And so the reason why I bring this up is, say you work for a company and you have DACA and your DACA expires, they know it expired. They can't just say, okay, now I want to hire you as an independent contractor to do the same thing you were doing before, because they know of your documentary status. So it's really important that that you know that going into it. So I do want to touch on DACA, just because there's been a lot of movement with DACA over the last couple of years. And I know it's not, there hasn't been anything recently, but I do want to bring it up. So DACA, for those of you that don't know, and I'll keep it very, very brief, because I'm sure most of you know what DACA is at this point. But it is deferred action. And so it allows people to have work authorization for 2 years and protection from deportation. So it's both things. It's the protection from deportation and the work authorization. And an approved DACA applicant can apply for a driver's license, a social security number, a travel document. Thing to note though, your driver's license is only valid as long as your DACA is valid. And so you could apply for a AB60 driver's license, which would give you a 10-year driver's license, but it would have that little logo on the top that says federal limits apply. And so these are the eligibility requirements for DACA. And I know that right now you cannot apply for DACA if you don't already have it. And so you already had to meet these, but there might be a change coming up. And so I want to make sure that you all know what the requirements are in case we see this change soon. So you have to be at least 15 years old, born after June 15th, 1981, came to the United States before you're 16. You were present here on June 15th, 2012. You didn't have documentary status or immigration status since June 15th, 2012. You've lived continuously in the United States since June 15th, 2007, and you are in school, graduated, or obtained a GED, and you haven't been convicted of a felony, significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors. And as of right now, DACA does not provide permanent lawful status or a path to citizenship. Obviously, we are constantly looking for ways to pass federal legislation to protect dreamers. So the current status of DACA, there's been a lot of back and forth. So DACA is back for renewal purposes only. And so it stopped anybody that was applying for DACA for the first time to be granted DACA. And this is all being appealed, and it's all in that process. But I do want to tell you a little bit of a nuance to this. So, and this is also something that's being litigated right now, or it's in the courts. It's if you had DACA and it expired over a year ago and you go to reapply now, you're considered an initial DACA. And so they're not approving those cases right now. They're not denying them. They're just sitting there. And so it's really important to know that if your DACA is expiring or it has expired, that you do renew it before a year has passed, or you submit your application before a year has passed. And I know that the filing fee can be really expensive, but the Mission Asset Fund, it currently gives 0% interest loans just to people that are applying for DACA. And not only that, they cover half of the filing fee for you. And so if you are looking to do that, that's an organization that would be able to help you pay for that as well. But in addition to that, the Biden administration decided that they wanted to protect DACA recipients and protect the DACA program. And so what they decided to do was pass a regulation. So regulations come from the executive branch. They don't come from Congress. And so they say, okay, I'm going to put something in the regulations and I'm going to make sure that it's passed and it's reviewed and there's buy-in from Congress before it goes through, but it's not a law per se. And so the legislation goes before, so it's in the rulemaking process right now. It was drafted, it was created, and it's going to keep the DACA program as is, but it would allow initial applications to be submitted again. We don't know when the process is going to end. We don't know when it's going to, when we're going to be able to apply for initials, but that is something that we see in the near future. But we are looking for Congress to pass some legislation to create more permanent change. And while there is some legislation before Congress right now to create a pathway to citizenship, we're not seeing a lot of movement on those pieces of legislation at the moment. So, and this, I already went into this a little bit, that your current, if you apply for DACA, it remains valid. And you have the work authorization, you have the protection from deportation, your DACA renewals will continue. And, but if you, and then the pending applications will be processed normally. But if you have initial DACA, they're not going to be approved now, or if you submitted over a year ago, then after your last one expired, it's not going to get approved right now. But when the regulations hit, once that gets passed, if your application's pending, they can start approving those cases right away. And so you have to decide, do you want to apply for DACA now, knowing that it could sit there, they're going to take your fee, it could sit there and it might not ever come to be. It's most likely that it will, but are you willing to take that risk to get that work authorization as soon as possible? So like I mentioned before, September 23rd, 2021, the administration started the rulemaking process to make DACA permanent. And if the regulation passes, individuals will be able to apply for DACA for the first time again. So in addition to DACA, DACA is something that is, it's temporary. It's not a permanent source of immigration relief. So I want to talk about some of those permanent ways that people can get relief here in the United States. So always consult with an immigration attorney or a Department of Justice accredited representative about what you qualify for. But here are some of the basics. These are all different pathways to citizenship. So the first one is applying for a green card, which is for lawful permanent residency status. And you can do that through a family member or maybe even an employer. And so say you came to the United States when you were young, you came here on either on a visa or you came undocumented, and then you received DACA and you've been working with your DACA, and now you have an employer that wants to sponsor you for a green card. As long as you had DACA before you turned 18 and you continue to have it, you can leave the United States and go to the consulate to apply abroad without concern of them accruing unlawful presence. So those that have been in the United States for longer than 6 months, undocumented, once they leave, it triggers a 3-year bar from you being able to come back And if you've been here undocumented for over a year and you leave, it triggers a 10-year bar from being able to come back. And so there's a lot of little nuances based on time here and status when you came, and that it's really important that you check and see if you're you're eligible. But I wouldn't discredit employment as an option, but the more common scenario is family. So a parent can who is a U.S. citizen or a spouse can apply for you. A parent, child, or spouse can apply for you to become a lawful permanent resident. And once you have that, you can go ahead and apply for citizenship down the road. And a lot of this is very nuanced. So I just want to kind of bring these options available to you. So if this brings something up for you, feel free to reach out to us. We can definitely set you up with an appointment and talk to you about what that remedy might look like for you. Then there's special visas just for victims of crimes. One of them is the U visa, and that's if you were a victim of a crime and you cooperated with law enforcement to apprehend the person that committed that crime against you. And it's only certain crimes, it's not all crimes, but if it's one of those crimes and you cooperate with law enforcement, this is a pathway to citizenship. And the thought is that we're not trying to go after the undocumented community. We're trying to go after the real criminals here, the ones that are causing these crimes. So if you are undocumented and you had the courage to come to law enforcement despite being afraid to work with law enforcement, that is more important than your documentary status. And we're going to help you become a lawful permanent resident or a citizen. VAWA stands for Victims Against Women's Act. Even though men can apply for this, and they do, it's for victims of domestic violence, and the domestic violence was committed by the U.S. citizen spouse or lawful permanent resident spouse, parent, or child. They have to be a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident for you to qualify for it. And the thought behind this one is that any of these individuals could have applied for you to get your lawful permanent residency status, but instead of helping you gain status, they can further your victimization by not helping you through the process. So the US government is trying to take the power out of the abuser and give the victims a way out and a way to help their situation. And then there's also T visas, which are victims of human trafficking. And so there's definitely a way for you to get a lawful permanent residency that way as applying for a T visa. This SIGIS, it stands for Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, and it's for minors who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected. And I always like to bring this up because you never know who you're going to encounter that might have been in this scenario. And so this would be somebody that might end up in foster care, or that's one of the bigger ones, but you might even find homeless youth that are there. And so that would be a trigger for that. Maybe somebody qualifies for a special immigrant juvenile status. I got a question here in the chat about Daca and Dreamers, and it was whether they're the same thing or they're different. So Daca is those who met the very specific criteria, that they applied and they received Daca. Dreamers tends to look at more of all immigrant youth that are dreaming for a better future for themselves here in the United States. And so that would be the main distinction there. So Dreamers can include DACA recipients, but it's also more inclusive than just DACA recipients. And then court relief, I always want to bring up court relief because there are some benefits that are available to you in court that you can't affirmatively apply for. And so it's really important that you know that there's other relief available in court, and you don't sign any documents saying giving up on your right to pursue a different remedy in court. And so when you go to talk to an attorney and try and figure out what is available to you, there's a couple things that you might want to bring with you to your consultation. You want to know when you came to the United States, how you came to the United States. Has anybody petitioned for you or for your parents in the past to become a lawful permanent resident? What is your immigration court history? Have you been in immigration court? Have you had any encounters with immigration or the police? Do you have an A number or a USCIS number? That's the number that's an immigrant number, which is how your immigration file is identified by the US government. And employment and address history can be helpful depending on the type of application that you are applying for. And so anytime you meet with an attorney, there's our Department of Justice credit representative, there's 3 things that you always want to know. Do you have a remedy available to you now? And if you do, what is the process moving forward with your case? And if you don't, do you have another remedy available for you in court that isn't available until then? And so that way you can prepare in the case of, the worst case scenario. And one of the things that I like to remind people of is that there's, everybody has heard about the voluntary departure where you can, if you encounter immigration, you can sign a voluntary departure and then you can end up in Mexico the very same day. But say you want to do a voluntary departure and you don't want to fight your case, you can also ask a judge for voluntary departure and they give you some time to gather your things, to settle your affairs before leaving the United States. So even though it's the same benefit, you also, you buy time. And lots of times that's what you want and what you need in order to move forward. But in addition to that, you might even there's even pathways to lawful permanent residency that are available in the court system. So if you're going to meet with an attorney or a Department of Justice or credit representative, you definitely want to check their credentials and make sure that they're licensed. calbar.ca.gov is how you look for attorneys licensed in the state of California. And this justice.gov/EOIR is how you look for representatives that are accredited by the Department of Justice. You want to know, has there been any disciplinary actions taken against them? What is their area of expertise? Immigration is so complicated, so you want to make sure that you're dealing with somebody that focuses on immigration because there's so much available, or there's so many different areas of law and complexities of immigration that you want somebody that knows all the complexities and how to work through it. You want to get a written contract, and you absolutely want to keep copies of everything. So somebody asked, would sexual assault qualify for the crimes to receive a visa? So sexual assault is one of the qualifying crimes under a U visa, and there's definitely organizations that help with that particular type of crime, or with the U visas in particular. And I can provide a copy of our list of referrals out so you would have access to it. But here locally, ICWIC and Casa Cornelia are the 2 main organizations that process the U visas. And here at Alliance San Diego, we are here to help you in any way that we can. Not only do we do the presentations, we offer free immigration consultations to everyone. And so if we're able to help you, we'll help you with your legal representation. We'll do it all for free. But if we're not able to help you, we'll tell you where you can go, who can help you, and what resources are available to you. And so if you want to reach out to us, feel free to do so. Our phone number is here, the 619-269-1823, extension 426, and you can go ahead and schedule an appointment with us. Thank you. That